Here are 10 rare photos from history from my weird bag of history photos. I don't know why I hold on to all of these, but... Number 10. A 15-year-old boy, oftentimes quoted as a man using a stick to take a picture. Now if you want to categorize this as a selfie stick, I wouldn't argue with you. But the stick isn't holding the camera, rather activating the shutter button with the stick. Though some may not think it's a selfie stick, it's definitely a selfie. But as amazing as this picture is usually described, it's not quite the only one. Or really special at all, to be honest. If this is a selfie stick, then you can find some in the early 50s, some in the late 40s, some in the early 40s, and even some in the 30s. And from what I can tell, this one is actually the oldest selfie stick photo ever uncovered, at nearly 100 years old, which included the newlywed couple Arnold and Helen Hogg, which they took in 1925. It's weird to think, but the man who took the oldest selfie had died even before my own parents, and probably your parents were even ever born. Number 9. Since the beginning of the Supreme Court, any photography within the Supreme Court while it's in session has been strictly prohibited, which is not hard to imagine it was difficult to ban photos in 1790 when the first Supreme Court assembly had taken place, since the first camera ever wouldn't even be invented until 27 years later, capturing a fuzzy nothing. But when photography would advance, it would become harder and harder to keep the cameras away. As in 1932, the only picture that had ever been taken inside during the assembly was taken by a man named Erich Salmon, who was a German photographer and had been hired by Fortune magazine to capture the true images of America during his tour. And that he did. Knowing this would be a shot to go down in history, he prepared a cast and faked a broken arm, then hid the camera inside of his sling and pulled it out to capture this photo. And though he most likely took more, they're probably long destroyed, with this being the only one to remain. And it was actually published soon after in the Fortune magazine. But surprisingly, that's not the only photo ever taken within the Supreme Court while it was in session, as only 5 years later, a young woman fashioned a hole in her purse, one just large enough for the camera's lens to see through, snapping this photo, which was also published, but in Time magazine in 1937. The photographer's description went as follows: an enterprising amateur, a young woman who concealed a small camera in her handbag, cutting a hole through which the lens peeped, resembling an ornament. She practiced shooting from the hip without using the camera's finder, which was inside the purse. And what makes this one more special than the last is that all 9 justices are captured in the same image while in session, and is a photo that would likely be the only one of its kind for the remainder of the US. Yet, we never knew who this young photographer was, because her identity remained a secret and is now long forgotten. And while this may not be a video about videos, a single video had been taken. In either 2013 or 2014, this video was taken after being snuck into one of the most secretive meetings on Earth.
I rise on behalf of the vast majority of the American people who believe that money is not speech, corporations are not people, and our democracy should not be for sale to the highest bidder. Overturn Citizens United. Keep the capital country. We will demand others.
And the reason these assemblies are so secretive? According to the Supreme Court protocol, all justices have an opportunity to state their views and raise any questions or concerns they may have. And in the reason given by the justices, the court needs to preserve the tradition, which people will not understand the function and oral arguments. Meanwhile, the media will use embarrassing sound bites, and the cameras will encourage showboating. And on that note, we should probably move on to number 8, because I might just accidentally make a half-hour video on the goings-ons of the Supreme Court. Number 8. A religious Klan member's America's First Parade. And almost unbelievable to some, but the Klan didn't used to be some hidden part of the community, but lead headship of conservatism in the US with no shame. Still, things haven't changed much, but as of the 70s, these showings outright became pretty taboo to most, no matter the political side. Political beliefs being in line with the Klan, from politicians to entire police stations to firefighters, teachers, and entire communities, any Klan activity was seen as keeping America first, which is supremacist code for death to minorities and the conservative idea of a whites-only country. They had marches, Christian Klan festivals, and even had a Klan baseball team, all on the idea of God-hating, brown skin, and immigration, even though the Bible is very apparent on its views of all of these topics. I guess we can just be happy we aren't then, but remember, if the victims of these groups are still alive, then so are the perpetrators. Number 7. Glizzy inspection. No, I'm kidding. Well, kinda. As medical examinations have been used for enlisted military personnel, photos for privacy reasons don't usually exist in abundance, which makes sense. How would you feel if your whole class, or work employees, came to your appointment to inspect that weird bump on your no-no zone? only for one of them to whip out a camera when your back was turned to get a picture of a single full moon. Yet, here we are, the Red Army's enlistment inception from over 100 years ago. And yeah, while they may be blurred in my video, these are 1918 cheeks under that blur. Number 6. Kim Il-sung. No, not the oh-so-gracious leader and grandfather of Kim Jong-un, but his trusty tumor. Before the baseball-sized tumor became what occupied his mind most when looking in the mirror, the moment it started to form, he banned all photos that included it, making the ones with it in the photo inherently rare. To deal with the fact that photos still need to be taken, he would turn slightly to the left in order to do his best at hiding it. But once that wasn't enough, it had become quite obvious hiding it was doing no good, and all approved photos were now also airbrushed and shopped before they were released to the public, obviously to keep with the facade of perfection that the great leaders are known so well for. Believe it or not, there's also theories thrown around about his grandson and his possible battle with the same condition, from not being out in the public eye to being hospitalized to even covering up a similar spot. But with everything edited to fit a script, we may just never know. Number 5. Erna Petrie, who some thought was an average housewife, but also a wife in 1943 in Germany. One time, a group of 6 Jewish boys from ages 6 to 12 escaped off a rail cart and stumbled across Erna. The sweet woman she was, she invited them over to her house and decided to prepare dinner and feed them. Then she waited for her husband to come back home, but he many times stayed late at work. As being part of the SS protection, sometimes work tended to be an overloaded day, so when he didn't arrive, Erna personally took the 6 boys out into the woods, forced them to turn around, and executed them one by one. Since Erna had not undergone any military training, most just considered her a serial killer. Nobody forced her, she wasn't sworn to anything, and committed this out of her very own desire and will. Both actually avoided detection during the initial search for war criminals, getting rid of material and even the SS tattoo, and were only found out when their son fled their country, and the police got a warrant to search their house, where they found photos of their old mansion. Then, when put on trial, Erna was asked how she could commit such heinous crimes while being a mother herself. She said she was so conditioned into fascism and racial laws that had become a mindset. She actually only passed after her 80th birthday in the year 2000. Number 4. Ronald Reagan. It's not often we see a US president looking so unprofessional, as they do hold the most professional office in the US. But in 1989, while still in office, Reagan, most known for his trickle-down economics, giving more money to the rich and hoping they'll give a few more pennies to the working class, freezing the minimum wage of $3.35 an hour, slashing funding to food stamps, trying to get rid of disability, and pretty much any average American funding aside from the military spending. Also, he tried to veto the Civil Rights Restoration Act, all the while the rich clapped behind the scenes, giving the 80s pretty much the worst rating in everything in the modern era. I will say, while hindsight is 20/20 and it's pretty easy to rip any president a new one, something had to go into this description other than bald head. Now, bald head. He had to cut half his hair for surgery to relieve fluid buildup. He was a pretty sick president behind the scenes, because until Trump was elected, he was actually the oldest president to take office. And in this photo, most certainly was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, in which he passed from later on, because as we know, it starts and lasts a while before it takes a person. Number 3. Before I make someone cry in the comments about an 80-year-old multimillionaire that defend with their life, yet they tell him for a fresh baked potato on a yacht in the fall. Oh yeah. Number 3. And if I didn't insult your intelligence enough, let's get some assistance with the oldest Roman insult ever, at a beautiful 1700 years old, with a neat little picture I will not be describing. But I'll tell you this, it's not a fish like I had first thought. And for what it says, it's usually described as a mangled version of the words Secundinus, the pooper. Another source says its crudely carved image often stood for good luck and fertility. But humans are humans, and we know exactly how Mr. Secundinus was feeling after he saw this. And this is only a small sample on the plentiful topic of history's graffiti. Number 2, and we're on the home stretch now. The Queen's cousins, and I'm not talking about her husband, since technically he is her third cousin from sharing the same great-great-grandma, but I am talking about her 2 actual first cousins. And the reason why they're so little known and these pictures so rare, sadly because they were both institutionalized because they both had mental disabilities, commonly cited as severe mental disabilities. Their names were Nerissa and Catherine, and they passed away in 1940 and 1961 respectively, or at least that's what the royals will have you believe, since that's what they pushed to be reported. Yet they both lived past those dates, and their entire time lived in a care home. Throughout their time in the hospital, there was no known record that the sisters were ever visited by any member of the Bosleyan or royal families. They actually only passed away in 1986 and 2014, living into very old age without a single visit from their family. People like to say, oh, it was a long time ago. They used to encourage families to not come and visit because it was said to be bad for them. Yet 2014 is not too unlike today, so at any moment they could have decided to grow a little smidgen of heart, yet didn't even have the energy to fake it. And number 1. As colonizers toured through the west side of America, many times cameras weren't allowed, but this 1886 photo shows what an average family would have been doing with their early trips. This is Nebraska, and the house might seem small from the outside, but it's actually built into the side of this hill. And to show his family and wealth, Mr. Sylvester Ralding gathered a Ralding family as the photographers passed through. His family includes Emma Ralding, Sylvester Ralding himself, daughter Bessie, sons Philip, William, and Harry, and their lovely sod house, along with 2 very valuable possessions, these 2 mules, which were likely the most valuable items they had owned, discounting the 3 boys who probably did most of the work. And lastly, their cow positioned on the top of the house, which is not actually on the top of the house like a lot of people say, it's on the hill behind it, but still, I mean, I guess that works. They even have a blurry little dog in the photo, though I have no idea how they got all these animals to stay still long enough. That doesn't really matter, because lastly and most importantly, their prized large watermelon, to show off how well fed and well adapted they are to their new recent living. And those are 10 rare photos from history that included like 20 photos and a video. And because obviously I can't help myself from ranting about some obscure historical event at literally 3:15 AM, I'm so serious right now. Let me know if you guys like this video by, well, I don't know, liking the video. And feel free to leave a comment if you know anything extra about these photos. I'm sure the people who I'm triggered are probably leaving tons of comments. Thank you guys so much for watching this entire video if you made it to the end. Maybe try watching this video. I'm pretty sure I can hear it calling your name.
Johnny, watch me. Watch me, Johnny. Johnny, click me.
Whoever's name is Johnny is totally freaked out right now.